Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Stand on Guard. It's Sunday. Hope you're having a blessed Sunday morning. And it's September 15th, midway through September. What happens tomorrow? Parliament's back, by elections. But more about all of that when we come back in a minute with more. Sorry, having a technical difficulty. With more of the news you need to know.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, please like the station. You've been doing that in large numbers recently. We're beating the YouTube suppression and Trudeau censorship. And subscribe if you want to, and if you need to resubscribe, make sure you are subscribed. They do unsubscribe you, but we've been really racking up subscriptions in the last couple of days. Thank you so much for listening to my pathetic appeal to to all of you viewers to support the station with subscriptions. It's really happening. We're about 900 away from 30,000. Big deal for us because we started with nothing, and I didn't know where the station was going to go. I think I do now, though. We're really moving forward and upwards, and as we continue to bring you all the news you need to know and to talk about the issues that are important to you from the viewpoint of somebody who has been active my entire adult life in politics, in journalism, in the military. I think I bring a lifetime of experience to this. And excuse my phone. Thank you again for watching. We're going to be talking about a couple of things, but I also have Dr. Anne Gillies standing by. She is just an incredible woman who's done a lot of work on the gender ideology issue. And of course, this is the week, Friday, September 20th, the million-person march. If you're in Ottawa, we'll see you at Parliament Hill right in front of the Peace Tower at 8:30. Get there early. There's going to be a lot of people, more than last year. And across the country, we are going to get an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people participating this year. Now, I'm not pulling that number from my hat. We've had Camille El-Sheikh on here twice to talk about this march in the last month. He has been working hard, diligently behind the scenes, getting all of his people from Halifax to Vancouver working for a successful march. Camille's not been sidetracked or distracted by foreign policy, and I'll put it that way. That's all I want to say about it. By things happening outside of Canada's borders, he's focused on what's important to Canadian parents. He's focused on what's important for your children. And that's why the organization is called Hands Off Our Kids. So stay tuned for the interview after we talk about a couple of things here. First of all, what's happening tomorrow? Parliament resumes. Lots of questions hanging over that House of Commons. But of course, 2 by-elections, one in Winnipeg, one in Montreal. David Lamette's old seat in Montreal used to be a strong Liberal fortress for many decades. Always went Liberal. Could go NDP or Bloc this time. Neither party, which of course I have any time for, but it'll be a strong signal again to Justin Trudeau. His leadership is not wanted, so-called leadership. But he's already anticipating losing the seat. Yes, he's already said, I'm not going anywhere if we lose the seat at Montreal. He really hasn't got a hope in hell of winning the one in Winnipeg. That's going to be between the NDP and the Conservatives. The Conservatives could pick that up. But Trudeau's already writing off Lamette's seat. So it's quite interesting. This is a guy who he's the guy who just pretends he's never going to leave. But remember Joe Biden in the dying days of his presidential run, his re-election run? I'm never going to stay. I'm not leaving. I'm staying here. No one's going to change my mind. That was about 24 hours he said that last time before he announced, I'm quitting because it's a time for a new generation to carry the torch. I mean, yeah, blah, 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 blah there. And that's what you get from these woke leaders who listen to their globalist masters. It wasn't Kamala Harris who told him to leave. It wasn't Nancy Pelosi who told Joe Biden to leave. It was the globalists. It's, get out. You're too old. Dementia showing. Time to put some other globalist inside. And the same will happen to Justin Trudeau when he has outlived his usefulness for the globalists. Mark Carney will be available. You know what's going to happen here. But what else is Trudeau doing here? And that Mark Miller, one of the worst immigration ministers we've ever had. Every immigration minister under Trudeau has been one of the worst immigration ministers we've ever had. This is a man who puts a cap on immigration 2 years after the next election. The guy is not sensible. He's got no common sense, and he doesn't even have policies that are relevant to today. They're relevant to a year or two after the next election. That's when he's putting his immigration cap on. But in the meantime, now he's forcing provinces to take these so-called asylum seekers. We know that's a euphemism in many cases for illegals, people who just walk across the border and say they're migrants, say they're refugees seeking asylum. We just push them across the border and we take them anywhere. But now they want to push these people to New Brunswick, to Alberta, to British Columbia. Well, New Brunswick and Alberta are pushing back. Let's listen to, first of all, to what Premier Blaine Higgs is doing in New Brunswick. He's saying, forget it.
Between Ottawa and New Brunswick, the feds are planning to relocate tens of thousands of asylum seekers to provinces other than Ontario and Quebec. The idea is to relieve pressure on the two provinces, but Blaine Higgs isn't happy about it. CTV's Sarah Plowman talked to the Premier today, and Sarah, what are his objections?
Sandy, Canada's immigration minister and New Brunswick's Premier Blaine Higgs are sparring over a proposal to bring more than 4,000 asylum seekers to this province, when right now there's fewer than 400. Ottawa is proposing to move tens of thousands of asylum seekers out of Quebec and Ontario. New Brunswick has fewer than 400 asylum seekers now. The Premier criticized the proposal yesterday.
The Justin Trudeau government is considering a plan to send 4,600 asylum seekers to New Brunswick without providing any financial assistance or any opportunity for us to have the ability to build the resources.
The allegations by Premier Higgs are largely fictitious. We at no times have said that we would impose asylum seekers on provinces without financial compensation.
Canada's immigration minister says he got a different indication from New Brunswick.
That they didn't want asylum seekers with or without compensation.
In order to ease pressure on Ontario and Quebec, Miller says the federal government has been modeling what a fair distribution of asylum seekers would look like. The numbers pitched to the provinces show of the more than 235,000 asylum seekers currently in Canada, more than 100,000 are in Ontario and more than 99,000 are in Quebec. Ottawa wants to relocate tens of thousands across the country. That could mean more than 21,000 people to BC, 18,000 to Alberta, and nearly 4,600 to New Brunswick. Miller says the relocations would be voluntary and would come with compensation to the provinces. CTV News asked Higgs why he said there wouldn't be compensation.
Well, did he identify the compensation model? Did he? Because it was not a discussion with the officials that presented this graph to us, this chart.
Higgs has said New Brunswick is a welcoming province that embraces immigration, but that this proposal would stretch its education and health systems far beyond what it can handle. Sandy.
CTV, Sarah.
You want to know how to take the pressure off the provinces and off the country? Stop taking in so many. Stop the mass migration program. Just stop doing this. That will take a lot of the pressure off. Stop making it sound like it's the province's fault for saying no. It's the minister's fault for saying yes. It's the federal government's fault for saying it's open door, come on in, we can keep taking hundreds of thousands, we can keep taking millions every year, and this is an unworkable, untenable policy, and that's how you reduce the pressure. Let's hear what Danielle Smith has to say. She's saying it's not open. She's citing the cost and shared values and push back against Ottawa's asylum seeker, I'm sick of that word, by the way, relocation plan. This is all nonsense. You know, and she's tweeted about this too. I'm not even going to attempt to read this. Have a look at her X posts here, and she lays out a very good reason and a series of reasons why Alberta is opposed to just taking in more of these migrants. Now let's listen to what Premier Daniel Smith had to say.
Now, people living in shelter spaces, people living in campgrounds, that is not good for the newcomers who are coming here. There just isn't the housing stock.
Smith issued a statement Thursday saying Alberta is not willing to take any more asylum seekers, especially without financial compensation.
And once again, financial compensation is not the issue. It's adding more and more people to Canada is mass migration. We do not have the jobs. We do not have the housing. We do not have the capacity, because there is tremendous dislocation when you bring in this many people at the same time. And this is you listen to Mark Miller, Long John Dimwit. He has got no idea what he's talking about, how to run an immigration policy, how to run an immigration department. He is completely witless. And this is the guy who remains in charge of Canada's immigration lack of a plan. Now, I want to go now to an interview here with Dr. Ann Gillies, who has been instrumental in the success of the million-person march for children, happening again this week. I can't say it enough. Be there, Parliament Hill, 8:30, September 20th, Friday. If you're not in Ottawa, if you're not in a provincial capital, go to your local mayor's office in whatever town or city you happen to reside in. The march will be on. There has been 12 months of planning behind this march. Last year's got more than 1 million. We got a 1.5 million people out. And it's going to be another success this year. So we're going to go to this interview now, and I encourage you. Listen, Anna has got some fantastic things to say here. So, and I'll be back after.
Looking at now, people living in shelter spaces.
Well, good morning, everybody. My guest this morning is Dr. Ann Gillies, and you might be familiar with Dr. Gillies' work on restoring the mosaic and unmasking the trans movement. These are the basic things we want to talk about this morning. But also, it's Sunday morning. Here we are, September 15th. We are 5 days away, or thereabouts, from the million-person march, which is going to take place in Ottawa. And, of course, Dr. Gillies will be a guest speaker at that event, and we'll be here in Ottawa to be there. But this is a nationwide event, and those of you who have watched the broadcast we've done with Camille El-Sheikh, the organizer, know that this is going to be taking place across Canada at towns and cities, capitals, from coast to coast. So, Dr. Gillies, you were there last year. We met. You were there at the One Nation Under God ceremony that we had on Parliament Hill in June to talk about the so-called Pride Month that afflicts Canada and many other countries. That's become Pride season. Wanted to talk about, first of all, just about what got you attracted to the million-person march last year, and why, and you're continuing to support it this year. What was it about it? I guess what it prompted some hope in me. I should say that when I first talked to Camille about it, I was very prompted to say, "Hey, somebody's doing something positive against the gender ideology in the school. Somebody's finally standing up for parents, and they really aren't doing this to make a buck." And my experience, unfortunately, with a lot of social conservatives, I'm an evangelical Christian, as you are, and I've battled over the years for issues that are of importance, not just against gender ideology. I'm fiercely pro-life, and I've been disappointed so often by social conservatives who just can't get their act together. And I was very impressed with what Camille was doing. So, what initially got you attracted to the million-person march last September?
Well, I'm like you. I also was very excited when I heard that anyone was choosing to organize something across Canada for parents to become involved and stand up for their children. I just really, actually, I've been praying for a long time, and I've been across Canada in different churches trying for many years to I would say wake up the church, but that's not right. The church understands. I mean, I'm talking about the evangelical church. The mainline church has capitulated to this indoctrination agenda years ago, which was all part of the Gay Manifesto, right? So it was to bring the churches under the domination and intimidation of the LGBTQ activists. And so what I found was that while pastors and leaders went, yes, this might be a problem, they were not willing. And they were not willing to be engaged in something proactive for the most part. Now, I have a few pastors that have just been phenomenal. But overall, the Christian church has failed miserably to promote biblical sexuality, pro-life, like you said. I mean, we're murdering babies, for goodness sake, at full term. This is just, it is evil incarcerated. It's just the conception of evil across our land. And I'm not talking about people in the LGBTQ communities being evil. I'm talking about the ideologies and the push behind all of these ideologies and thoughts. So when Camille kind of came on the scene for me, and I was introduced to him via a friend who had phoned me and said, "Hey, you need to see this." And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I was very excited to see someone, and a young man, I mean, I'm older, younger man, willing to stand up for children and parental rights across Canada. And of course, that was initiated out of some events that happened in Alberta. And I actually spoke in Alberta. I just happened to be there on some other speaking and found out there was a rally at City Hall. This is in June. And I said to my husband, "Oh, I'm not speaking Friday night. Can we go to this?" And he looked at me like, "Oh, here we go." And yeah, so we went, and I met Mahmoud. And I have to say that these people were so open and welcoming to what I brought to the table. And I didn't find that in the Christian church. I found the Christian church very fearful. And so it's I really have seen, though, the Christian and non-believers, so whatever faith or no faith, coming together under this movement. To me, it's very exciting.
Well, it's interesting. You should talk about the evangelicals as being so ineffective. And people have said to me, "Why are you working with Muslims?" And I'm saying because the Muslims are doing something. And Camille is welcoming to people of all faiths. And I've worked with Roman Catholics over the years on pro-life issues simply because I've seen no action from evangelical churches, certainly none from
Exactly.
mainline Protestant churches. So I don't agree with a lot of Catholic doctrine, but I've embraced conservative Catholics who are willing to fight for the unborn because we have to do something. There are millions
Absolutely.
of the unborn are being slaughtered every year. And if we do nothing except stand by and say, "Well, I don't think Christians should get involved in politics," I'm afraid that's a cop-out. So I know there are some evangelicals out there who say, "I'm not working with Camille because he's a Muslim." I just find that beyond reproach. I think that's disgusting. And I'm working with Camille again this year because somebody is actually doing something. And I have, as I said, I've been disappointed. I took a year out of my life to fight same-sex marriage, for instance, when that was I calculated risk in terms of doing something about that. But I found evangelical churches at that time were very reluctant to step forward and say, "This is what we believe in, and this is what we want to fight for." And that again was another example of real fear from evangelicals. So I applaud what you're saying here, and it's been my experience. And I want
Well,
to.
that was
I
in
think we're
1980.
yeah, I think we're finally connecting in terms of having a political impact. And it was interesting to me that, of course, after we had this demonstration, this profound demonstration of religious unity, demonstrating that most Muslims, and for that matter, most Hindus and Sikhs, are socially not in agreement with the Trudeau government. They have been led over the years to believe that somehow they have something in common with the new Liberal Party, which is completely at odds with traditional morality. And we had a religious unity, and suddenly that was destroyed temporarily by events in foreign lands. But I have been so impressed that Camille has kept this unity together. He has focused on the important thing, which is parental rights. I have to tell you, and because I have a family member, and I won't be more uh, direct than that, who was a victim of gender ideology in the schools. And it amazed me. People think this is a relatively new phenomenon where parents are not being told by the education system that children are being encouraged to change their pronouns, children are being encouraged to transition without the knowledge of the parents. And I can tell you, I had a close member of my family in the Ontario school system, and I knew nothing about what was going on in terms of her mind being bent by gender ideology, by teachers, by groups in the school. And this attitude persists to this day. I just recently wrote an article for the Post Millennial about a student in Southern Ontario who decided to transition after being pressured by teachers,
Yes.
by other people in the school. Her parents had no inkling this was happening. The Ontario government response was, well, this probably shouldn't have happened, but we're not really going to do anything about it in the future. They're not committed. They're not dedicated to ensuring parents know. We're seeing some action in Ontario and New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, Alberta. There's pushback there. There's nothing happening in Ontario. Do you think though we are seeing improvement here? Is there more momentum on our side now for parents at least to be informed consent? Are parents going to know what's going on in their classrooms?
Well, I do believe that there is momentum, David. And one of the things that I've seen just in the last 2 years is, I would call it a new awakening. And I'm going to be writing on that soon. But I think that we need to understand, like you said, this has been going on for a long, long time. And the ideology and queer theory that was presented in the 1980s permeates education from academia downward. And it has changed the minds of, generations. We're looking at adults now, young adults, or 30, 40-year-olds who have had their minds literally, I'll say, corrupted by queer theory and gender ideology, to the point where they are so consumed with this being right, and the people who oppose them, parents who are concerned about it and the effect on their children, that we are somehow evil. Nevertheless, when I started, I've been researching same-sex attraction. Particularly for me in the evangelical church, I think I had higher expectations, and I tend to be very, I like to look on the bright side of things. And so when I kind of was realizing that, well, unless we get engaged, there is no bright side, folks. And so when I really got to know Camille, well, I didn't know him really before the march too much. We talked a couple times, but I just wanted to be there. And I would do whatever I can to wake up Canadian parents, grandparents to the tragedy that's happening to their children. And it's not just, you see, if they have children or grandchildren, and I hear grandparents telling me, my grandchild's, deciding they're going to be a boy or going to be a girl. But it's not just gender gender transitioning or cross-sex transitioning, whatever you want to call it. It's the whole picture that people don't understand, that there is a very diabolical agenda against the family. And I think that once parents begin to understand that whole picture, they're going to be able to grasp the need to be more proactive. And so we're getting there. I've seen a lot happen since the Million Person March. There's a lot more people engaged. Parents are talking about it. So it's encouraging, but it's a long haul. We have to be in here for the long haul, because this agenda has been going on for 70 years. So, hey, wake up, folks. It was very strategic, and we're late to the game.
Well, certainly when I went to school, when it wasn't that long ago, there was no sense of gender dysphoria going on in the classroom. I don't recall anybody when I was growing up in elementary school, junior high, or high school having a crisis of gender dysphoria. And now, of course, it seems like 1 in 3 students are affected by this. And this has become some sort of cultural icon of our age. It's just so severe. This is a crisis so severe. And what I really resent most of all about this gender ideology is they cloak their actions in euphemisms, as the left always does. And the one that drives me absolutely beyond the bend is gender affirming care, which, of course, is the exact opposite of what it says. When you mutilate 10-year-olds with sex change operations, and I won't even say gender transition surgery. These are sex change operations that these people are advocating for kids as young as 10 years old. And this is somehow gender affirming care. These are operations that are causing not just physical pain, that necessitate drug use for the rest of their lives, but the psychological trauma in so many cases. Let kids be kids, I say. I mean, if these are issues that are still dominant in their minds when they're 18 years old, then they have a right to proceed with whatever they want to do. But imposing this on children just breaks my heart, because we don't allow children to drive cars or vehicles at 10. We don't allow them to drink alcohol or smoke marijuana. But yet we're advocating something as incredibly complex and potentially devastating as a sex change operation. And is this about euphemisms, making a process that is essentially potentially very destructive into something that sounds just very holistic?
Well, I mean, it is the upside down world. The evil is good perception. And that goes back again to queer theory, to deconstruct normalcy, to deconstruct the family, to deconstruct reality. And so anything that will deconstruct. And so here we're deconstructing children, their biological sex. And it's not just changing in this, the whole idea of the puberty blockers, which are devastating, and the hormones, which they're changing the children. There's a lot of anger. Like, you put someone on hormones and you're going to get some mood changes. Hello. And we're seeing more violence. We're seeing, and it's not just with the transgender, I mean, more violence in the streets, everything, because because our population has lost its footing. Canada has lost its footing. And so there's nothing to hold on to that's secure. When you can't even know if a woman is a woman, and a man is a man, that is the epitome of insecurity. And for children who are just developing their minds, I mean, we have created the greatest mental health crisis we've ever seen in our children. And I mean, cell phones are there, everything's there, but that's all impacted by social media, TikTok, Reddit. They're all pushing children. So we have the education system, some teachers who are very pro gender ideology, really pushing the children, suggesting, and children are very suggestive, right? So we have teachers who see a child, a little girl playing with the truck. We used to, think, oh, that's good. We can integrate, children can play with whatever they want to. Girls don't have to just play with dolls. Hello. Now, a teacher sees a girl playing with a truck, and all of a sudden, oh, you must be a boy. And teachers are saying that to children. This is just unbelievable. But it's like I said, decades coming down the pipe, and so we have a great tragedy in our country, and we have a moment. I would say a moment in time to turn this around. And you were talking. I'm going to show you a picture of the last book I wrote. And it's called Ultimate Conception.
Yeah.
So the truth of gender affirming care, because parents need to, and it's a fairly easy read. It's totally research based, but it's readable for parents and grandparents. What you need to understand is truth. We need to have a truth revelation across Canada, across the US, across the world, back to truth. And you see, queer theory despises truth. We're in a post-truth culture, and we need to understand that when you stand for truth, it's going to cost you something, and people are afraid of the cost.
Yeah, and you mentioned the little girl playing with the dump truck, or if it was a little boy playing with a Barbie doll, that would just be looked at as, well, he's going through a phase.
Yes.
He's going through a phase. It's no big deal. It certainly does not necessitate some kind of gender transition surgery, as they would call it. And suddenly, it's madness to me that we've come to that where we think that's the instant solution. That's the go-to theory now. Like, if somebody does, I mean, go ahead, get it out of your system. Even if you're like 16 or 7, if you're a 16 or 17 male and you want to cross dress, go ahead, cross dress. Get it out of your system. That doesn't mean you want to be a woman. It doesn't mean you want to change your sex. And that to me is where the mindset is gone. And it's just insanity, absolute insanity. And I don't know why. Well, yes, I do know why it's come to this, because this is definitely a program that's being foisted on us. And to me, the fact that ordinary people can suddenly say, but there is an ideology going on here, and it's very strong. It's very powerful. And it appeals directly to people's emotions because they pretend they're trying to care for children. They pretend they have their best interests in mind. And the worst offender of that is the prime minister, who pretends he cares about kids in this country, and he doesn't at all. But I wanted to ask you, if you go to your LinkedIn site, you talk about restoring the mosaic. Now, I find this interesting because Canada, of course, has always been referred to as a mosaic. And so what exactly do you mean by restoring the mosaic, Dr. Gillies?
Well, I felt I prayed a lot about the name of that, because I thought, well, what is it that is in my heart for Canadians? And one of the things for me is that, we as Canadians have, believe it or not, Prime Minister Trudeau, we have a national identity. And we have an identity we have had throughout the world of being a melting pot where people can come and can immigrate even and see the acceptance and love of Canadians. That doesn't mean that we in the past with immigration and with people coming into Canada, we had this set, and if you think of a mosaic, all the different colors, and then how they're welded together. And I'm not, I don't do cut glass on it, so I don't know the right terms, but they're individuals, but they are welded together in a common goal, and that is the nation of Canada and being Canadian, not being an individual cultures that are promoting their cultures in the sense, and I'm not saying you can't have, you have Polish places in the cities, you have that, but we come together nationally in a sense of solidarity for Canadian principles. And Canadian principles were based on a godly foundation. And so restoring the mosaic to me is restoring faith, family, and freedom. We have the freedom of religion in Canada. Just think how many people immigrated to Canada because they couldn't practice their religion in their home countries. How many people were persecuted and they come to Canada? So the melting pot idea, but in a sense, a mosaic is more structural to me. We have our individuality and we have our individual families, and we encourage that. We have our religious beliefs, and we encourage that. We don't impose, on others. We might present what we believe, and here's what I believe, and there's what you believe. And it's like Camille and I. I find Camille extremely connected emotionally. He's very, very honoring. And do we agree theologically? Of course not. But there's this ability to meld together and to work together, and that's Canadian. So that's kind of where restoring the mosaic is about. What it's about.
That is just beautiful. That's exactly where I'm coming from, and thank you for your eloquence in explaining that to people, because I've come in my own personal journey to a more libertarian stance on all this, because I don't think we're going to retransform Canada into a Christian nation. I don't think that's possible.
No.
And of course, a lot of social conservatives think that is the goal. I just want the responsibility for raising our children, for governing our lives back to the individual, back to the family. And that's what Camille is saying. And that's why the organization is called Hands Off Our Kids. And that's what really appealed to me, because this is an organization that says the parents decide, the individual decides, not the state. We need to get the state out of the business of telling families and schools and institutions how to think, how to behave. And I think that's the only way out of this. And I've thought this through over the years. I've been a journalist. I've been a military spokesman. I've been involved in politics. And I've been an activist at times on issues such as this and the pro-life movement. And I personally come to my own conclusion that we need to get the government out of our lives as much as possible and to put families back in control. That's really what Canada was all about in the beginning. And that's where I think we need to go. And that's where I think Camille's brilliance on this was to say, we're going to start the school year with a 1 million person march in September, and we're going to end it with the My Child June, which I think was just brilliant, because it's once again it's affirming at the beginning of the school year that the parents are in charge, not the school boards, not the politicians, and it's affirming at the end of the school year the parents are in charge, not the politicians who want to invent something ridiculous called Pride Season and want to take the focus off of children developing normally to imposing an ideology upon their minds. And I think that was the brilliance of Hands Off Our Kids. And it's, I've told Camille that many times, and that's why I support this. And I think it's if there's anything, I say this to evangelical Christians, if there's any movement or organization you really want to support out there, and don't look for the perfect Christian movement, because there is none. And they certainly won't be doing any effective work. They'll be infighting. They'll be telling each other, you're not perfect enough. But join a multi-faith organization that actually has clear objectives, that actually has an objective that's achievable, instead of saying we're going to just make everything perfect again. It's not going to happen. But we can take back our families. We can take back our children. And to some degree, we can take back our country. When I hear Camille talk about his Canada, for instance, I say, that's how I feel about Canada. And that's exactly how real Canadians feel about Canada. This is a land of freedom where I can speak freely. I can believe in what I want to believe. The state is not going to tell me how to think or how to act or how to speak. And that's the kind of Canada I was raised in, and that's the kind of Canada Camille talks about all the time. And there's so many people who come out for this march. I talked to so many new immigrants who came to Canada for freedom, and they've been grossly disappointed because Justin Trudeau wants to take away their free speech, wants to take away their right to be a parent, wants to take away their right to choose how to live their lives. We have an authoritarian government in the Trudeau government. We have an authoritarian so-called leader in Justin Trudeau. And it's the immigrants, the new immigrants in so many cases, who recognize it, who say, this is not the Canada I came to. I came to Canada for freedom. And I'm on the verge of losing my free speech. There is a tune to the dangers of Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, the most odious piece of legislation ever to come into the legislative view in Canada, in my opinion. It's worse than anything the United Kingdom has, anything the United States is proposing, anything Australia has. This is the worst anti-free speech legislation in the world.
Yes.
And they recognize that. And I say that to Christians, that if you think this is just about a movement for Christians only, no, we need to embrace the hand of Muslims and other people of faith who want their free speech back, who want their parental rights back. And I see what you're talking about in restoring the mosaic, that to me speaks to me so eloquently, that this is about getting our basic freedoms back and ensuring we don't lose them again. And in unity, there's strength. And I think that's what this million-person march, to me, demonstrates. The unity of common sense people who just want to be parents and individuals and free Canadians again. So I'm looking forward to a great march on Friday.
Me too. But you just swore. You used a swear word. Common sense. Common sense. That is the ultimate swear word to the whole ideological kind of concept. One thing, there's a couple things I wanted to say in response. Number one, it was never perfect. You know, Canada was never perfect. We don't have perfection because we don't have perfect people, but we had people who were the founding fathers who were intent on really establishing a country that promoted the very things I mentioned, our faith, family, and freedom. And the other thing that you mentioned were new immigrants. And I was in Ottawa, this is last, I don't know, April sometime. And I was walking on the street, and we were waiting to get into an event, and there was a cameraman there, and we were early, so we were just chatting with him, my husband and I. And so I kind of brought up a little bit of this subject about Canada and freedoms. And he was recently, him and his family recently immigrated, and I think within the last couple of years. And he said his wife is so upset. They came expecting just what you said, freedom to speak what was on their heart, freedom of religion, freedom. And what they've come to is oppression greater than what they left. And his wife is pushing him to move back to their country that they left. And you're seeing a lot of like Trudeau is he's shot himself in the foot because new immigrants, new Canadians that have immigrated specifically from communist countries or oppressive countries, they understand what oppression is. We didn't have oppression before we were told we are oppressed and that we are racist and we have all these things, we have all these problems. You know, we didn't have them. Not by and large. I'm not saying that there weren't some people that were racist in the last, 50 years, of course, but that underlying tone, Canadians are known for embracing one another. And it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been a perfect road. Of course not. But our governments and our politics previous to the last 20 years at least was really intent on providing a framework that encouraged people to love one another. Here's the neat thing. My daughter, when she was having her little girl in the hospital, she was then in a bed next or in a room next to a Jamaican mom. And those two moms and those two daughters have been like this. Lexi's 16 now. There was no, it wasn't about race. And those two little girls grew up together. They didn't know anything about color. They love each other. And they have been best friends forever. You see, that's the Canada we need. That's the Canada we need back. And yeah. I don't think governmentally I have a lot of suspicions and questions. I don't know that the structure of government as it is will provide that. I don't have the answers. I wish I did, but I know people who might have some answers. And so what has to happen is that, like you said, parents need to arise.
Yes, and the left wants to frame the Million Person March as a hateful event. They love to say anybody who disagrees with them is hateful. And of course, it drives them crazy that the reverse, the obverse is true. This is a love-in of people of faith getting together and affirming their faith and their love for their children and each other. And there's no hate going on. There's even people in the LGBT community who are with us and saying, no, this is a horrible violation of children. We agree with you. So this is bringing people together. And I use that swear word again, common sense. This is about live and let live. Let people live their lives unencumbered by the control and the tyranny of the state, of the government, which increasingly is encroaching upon our ability to live our lives as free Canadians. So, and thank you for being here today. I will see you on Friday. I say I am the Master of Ceremonies again this year. I'm proud to be the Master of Ceremonies. I think any journalist who is out there promoting the gender ideology like it's a given should have their head examined. And we need to look on freedom in this country, especially with the possibility, the potential of the censorship law, C-63 passing. Censorship has to be the enemy of every journalist. Every journalist should be out there opposing this government for what it wants to do to our free speech and our ability to think for ourselves. So I will be doing that next Friday. I know you will be too. And once again, it starts at 8:30 in Parliament Hill. If you're not in Ottawa, go to your local mayor's office. If you're in a capital, such as Edmonton or Victoria, go to your provincial legislative building, and that's where the march will start. And we're going to get more than 1.5 million this year, which we hit last year. I think we're going to hit 2 to 3 million people because this movement is growing. Because once again, this is about common sense. So thank you, Dr. Gillies, for joining me today, and we'll see you later in the week.
Yes, God bless.
Thank you so much for joining me today on another episode of Stand on Guard on the KRAYDEN'S Right channel. God bless you on this Sunday. We've got a tremendous week ahead as Parliament opens. Let's keep fighting. Let's keep resolving to resist. And I'll be back again tomorrow morning, Monday, September 16th. We will be watching those by-elections, and I will be on the air tomorrow night with the results when we know them. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.